Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. In France, at least 3 people have been killed and several others injured in a knife attack in the southern city of Nice. Nice Mayor Christian Estrosi said that a suspect has been detained near the incident in Notre Dame Church. In Afghanistan, at least 8 prisoners have been killed in a prison riot in the western Herat province. Officials say 12 others were injured, but the situation is now under control. A Taliban spokesperson said that the riot ensued after police started abusing the prisoners during the shifting. France and Germany have imposed a second national lockdown after a record spike in COVID-19 cases. India reported 517 deaths overnight, with the death toll crossing 120,000. The country's total number of infections has crossed 8 million. In Pakistan, the virus has claimed 16 lives overnight, with the death toll rising to 6,775. Globally, 1.17 million people have lost their lives to the virus, while nearly 44.5 million have been infected. In Vietnam, at least 31 people have been killed as Typhoon MOLAVE thrashed the country's coastline. Around 48 others are missing in the landslides triggered by the torrential rains from the typhoon. For news in detail, stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. In France, 3 people have been killed and several injured in a knife attack in the southern city of Nice. Police say victims included a woman who was decapitated at a church. Nice Mayor Christian Estrosi says that a suspect has been detained. In a tweet, he urged the people of Nice to avoid the area and let the police and emergency services work. French anti-terrorist prosecutors department says it has been asked to probe the attack. President Emmanuel Macron is attending an urgent crisis meeting in the Interior Ministry. Meanwhile, French lawmakers observed a minute of silence for the victims. This comes as France reels from the beheading of a school teacher in Paris by a man of Chechnyan origin. In Afghanistan, at least 8 prisoners have been killed in a riot in a facility in the western Herat province. Officials say 12 others were injured, but the situation is now under control. They say the injured prisoners have been taken to the hospital. The Afghan government says the unrest ensued after police began clearing some partitions created by prisoners in a block, but a Taliban spokesperson disputed the account, saying the riot began after police started abusing prisoners during shifting. The United States has ruled out talks over a technical solution of Turkey's procurement of Russian S-400 missile defense system. U.S. Assistant Secretary for State, Military and Political Affairs Clark Cooper said Turkey will have to abandon its plans of operational of S-400 if it wants the 5th-generation NATO F-35 jets. Addressing a virtual event, he said that the United States has given multiple options to Turkey to meet the requirements to ensure their air defense. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has called on the United Nations to hold urgent talks for an international peace conference. In a letter to the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Abbas urged him to coordinate on the Quartet of the Middle East. Abbas said that the conference will help pave the way for a serious peace process based on international law. He said that the conference should put an end to Israel's occupation and help Palestinians achieve their freedom. Earlier, the United Nations Security Council convened a virtual open debate on the current developments in the Middle East. The Saudi-led coalition in Yemen says it has destroyed 6 drones launched by the Houthi rebels. Coalition spokesman Turki al-Malaki said that the explosives-laden drones targeted Saudi civilian facilities. He said that the coalition forces are taking steps to ensure people remain safe from rebel attacks. This comes just after a day the coalition destroyed 3 ballistic missiles fired towards Saudi cities of Junzan, Najran, and Khamis Mashhad. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has accused Spain of helping an opposition member, Leopoldo Lopez, flee the country. In a press conference, Maduro said that the Spanish ambassador to Venezuela, Jesus Silva, will be expelled over his involvement in the affair. Lopez, who fled to Spain on Sunday, stayed at Silva's residence after escaping from house arrest. Meanwhile, Maduro revealed that Venezuela's Amwe oil refinery was targeted by a powerful weapon in a terrorist attack. He added Venezuela has gasoline reserves equivalent to 20 days of consumption.
Yesterday, the Amwe refinery was attacked with a powerful weapon. A powerful long weapon that we are investigating to determine what type of weapon it was, one of the most important refineries in Venezuela and Latin America. They wanted to cause a total explosion at the Amwe refinery. They demolished a tower with a level of thickness in steel that is superior to a war tank.
Talking about the upcoming National Assembly election, Maduro said over 300 foreign observers will monitor the December 6th polls. France and Germany have imposed a second national lockdown after a record spike in COVID-19 cases. India reported 517 deaths overnight, with the death toll crossing 120,000. The country's total number of infections has crossed 8 million. Globally, 1.17 million people have lost their lives to the virus, while nearly 44.5 million have been infected. More on this. The surging cases in the second wave of COVID-19 pandemic have wiped out months of gains. Europe and the United States are particularly being battered by the second coming of the virus. A new wave of curbs has swept through Europe, resembling the blanket lockdowns earlier in spring. France, Italy, Germany, Poland, and many other European nations have been registering record daily cases. While the only hope out of this whirlpool is a cure, the delivery of potential vaccines is likely only from April next year.
In best case scenarios, we could see monthly deliveries of about 20 to 15 million doses of vaccines. The moment the first companies start to signal that they are on the road, the big numbers of supplies are due to start in April.
Over in Asia, too, India's top laboratories say their trials of Russian Sputnik V vaccine are expected to be concluded only by March 2021. China and South Korea, 2 countries that handled the virus best, are also witnessing a spike in new COVID-19 cases. Meanwhile, the pandemic is now hitting Russia's far-off regions as the country sends army doctors to fight the virus in the Ural Mountains.
We're not talking about the second wave of the pandemic, but as we have discussed just this morning, some regions are facing the first wave now, according to experts. We have to monitor the situation closely and react in time and efficiently.
In Latin America, Mexico has surpassed 90,000 confirmed deaths just a day after it crossed 900,000 infections. Pakistan has registered 16 more deaths from COVID-19 overnight, pushing the toll to 6,775. The health ministry says 908 people have tested positive for the virus in the last 24 hours. The ministry said there are 11,695 active cases in the country. It added 624 COVID-19 patients across the country are in critical condition. It said out of the over 331,000, more than 312,000 people have recovered so far. Meanwhile, the National Command and Operations Center has made it mandatory to wear face masks in public places. It said all commercial areas, including shopping malls and restaurants, will close by 10 p.m. local time. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan and the Chief of Army Staff, General Qamar Javed Bajwa, have discussed the country's security situation. The Army Chief met Khan at the Prime Minister House in Islamabad. Khan paid tributes to the personnel of Pakistan Army, Frontier Corps, and law enforcement agencies who sacrificed their lives for their motherland. The two also deliberated on recent efforts to stoke violence in Pakistan. The Prime Minister asserted that the entire nation is united against the cowardly acts of the enemy. Pakistan's Council of Islamic Ideology has approved the construction of a new temple in Islamabad. In a ruling, the council said Islamic law allows minorities a place of worship. Prime Minister Imran Khan had promised $600,000 for the temple's construction. The ruling has left an open possibility that money can be distributed among Hindu communities to use as they see fit. It is expected that Prime Minister Imran Khan will give a formal order to allow the temple's construction. Member of Parliament and Hindu leader Lal Malahi has praised the ruling of the Islamic Council. About 3,000 Hindus live in the country's capital, Islamabad. The United States of Pennsylvania has imposed a nighttime curfew in Philadelphia to contain the ongoing civil unrest. In a statement, Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf said he has mobilized state National Guard troops to assist law enforcement. In a statement, the city managing director's office said police made 172 arrests over 2 nights. It added among these protesters are charged with assaulting police officers. The statement read 53 police officers were injured during the clashes with the protesters. Black Lives Matter protests reignited in the city after police fatally shot a black person, allegedly armed with a knife. The United States has warned American citizens in the UAE and Saudi Arabia against potential terror attacks. In a statement, the U.S. Embassy in Dubai said that it had reported the terrorist groups can attack its citizens and interests. It asked Americans in the region to remain alert. The U.S. Embassy in the Saudi capital, Riyadh, also warned American citizens of the possibility of missile or drone attacks. This coincides with an escalation of attacks by Yemen's Houthi rebels against the kingdom. For more news, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. In Vietnam, at least 31 people have been killed as Typhoon MOLAVE thrashed the southeastern Asian country's coastline. Around 48 others are missing in landslides triggered by torrential rains from the typhoon. The landslides, which hit the remote areas in the central province of Quang Nam, killed 19. State media said 12 fishermen died at sea. The government says it has deployed hundreds of soldiers and heavy machinery to search for the survivors. In a statement, Deputy Prime Minister Trinh Dung said bad weather was hampering rescue efforts. The typhoon has left millions of people without electricity and damaged 56,000 houses so far. MOLAVE has weakened to a tropical depression after making landfall and is expected to reach the city of Laos later. In the United States, Hurricane ZETA has slammed on the state of Louisiana with winds up to 175 kilometers per hour, bashing the Gulf Coast up to Mississippi. Officials forecast life-threatening conditions as a 55-year-old man died after being electrocuted by a downed power line. The storm left 875,000 customers without electricity in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. U.S. National Hurricane Center says ZETA's winds made it a strong Category 2 storm. It said rain of 2 to 4 inches is expected from the Gulf Coast to the central Appalachians. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards has urged residents to take shelter, promising immediate rescue and recovery aid. The Trump administration has declared an emergency, providing additional federal resources to Louisiana. In Warsaw, thousands took to the streets for a 7th day against the court ruling that further limits Poland's abortion laws. Police warned demonstrators not to target churches again after some services were disrupted and buildings defaced in an earlier protest. After marching through the center of the Polish capital, protesters stopped outside the parliament. Last week, the court ruled that abortion due to fetal abnormalities was not permissible under the constitution. Demonstrators blamed the nationalist government of Prime Minister Malthus Morawiecki for the verdict. More protests are planned across Poland later this week. Peru has reported its first case of diphtheria in 20 years amid an alarming low vaccination rate due to COVID-19. Public Health Vice Minister Luis Suarez said a 5-year-old girl living in the capital of Lima was diagnosed with a respiratory infection. Suarez said that she was stable and being monitored closely by doctors. He said health authorities had issued just 40% of their planned diphtheria and tetanus vaccines so far. The government has issued a national epidemiologist alert to detect other potential cases, bolster vaccinations, and curb any potential wider outbreak. In Yemen, conflicts, climate change, and the weak economic growth are leaving more people without enough to eat. The coronavirus pandemic has contributed to make the situation even worse. More on this report.
The United Nations warns nearly 100,000 children are at risk of dying in Yemen due to malnutrition that has increased about 10% in 2020. The country is approaching a dire food security crisis. The UN observes that cases of children with severe acute malnutrition are rising at alarming rates.
We are receiving many malnutrition patients and seeing many deaths caused by the poor economic conditions and the inability of parents to come to the hospitals because of the economic conditions.
The UN describes this as the world's largest humanitarian crisis, with 80% of the population reliant on humanitarian aid.
We call upon the United Nations to break the siege for our children and so that we can live in peace. Our children are dying and falling ill and they have done nothing wrong. The whole world is conspiring against Yemen and against us and our children.
Despite a difficult operating environment, humanitarians continue to work across Yemen. According to a report, if acute malnutrition is left untreated, around 20 to 30% of children will die each year.
European markets have edged up in anticipation of the European Central Bank's latest monetary policy decision. The European Stock 600 has moved a fraction above the flat line. London's FTSE 100 and Italy's FTSE MBI have also edged up fractionally. Frankfurt's DAX is leading the gains after adding over 0.5%. The CAC 40 in Paris has moved up marginally. Earlier, all Asian bourses edged lower, with the exception of mainland Chinese stocks. And now it's time to take a look at the weather around the world. For more news updates, you can follow us on our social media at indus.news.